Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today we'll be taking a look at one of the most recent releases, which is of course from the Bernice Summerfield range of adventures, being Bernice Summerfield The Story So Far, Volume 2, featuring 3 adventures split throughout the era of Bernice Summerfield and the different events in her life. Previously in my Big Finish reviews I did of course cover the Volume 1 of adventures, so before actually checking out this review I do recommend checking out that review because that box set kind of contains some earlier adventures from the early half of her life, such as meeting the younger version of Bernice and also get introduced to a few of her sort of older companions in there as well. This box set is very much a little bit more New Adventures style, where we have a few more reoccurring characters from the Doctor Who era of the show, including the Unbound Doctor as portrayed by David Warner and also the Valeyard as portrayed by Michael Jacent as well. Actually, first off, and as always in the description below, I will leave the link to go and buy a release from Big Finish website. It's currently out now. The physical edition is £20 and the download version is £15. However, if you do order it direct from Big Finish website, by ordering the physical edition you do also get the download as well pretty much automatically, so it's a little bit more value for money, so I recommend buying it from there. Naturally, if you are interested by what I say throughout this review, you can also check out all the story details on the Big Finish website, along with all the different synopsis stuff, along with the casting details and technical information, as you can also listen to the trailer on the Big Finish website as well. The box set is currently at the pre-order price, however after the 31st of October 2018 it will be increasing in price to I do believe around £30–35, something like that, so naturally if you are a Bernice Summerfield fan I recommend getting it in the next month or so in order to avoid that price increase, and therefore you can save a little bit of money, which is naturally always good, especially now I'm a student and I need to save as much money as possible. Firstly, taking a look at some of the casting information, naturally once again I may as well start off with Lisa Bauman herself as Professor Bernice Summerfield, and this box set is a little bit more of the Bernice that naturally I've got used to in the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield. It is a little bit more of that recent version. However, once again, by no means is it boring or anything like that. It is naturally the Bernice that I know a little bit better, but that said, at the same time Big Finish have still managed to do something a little bit more different with her characters. Yeah, and natural compliments for Lisa Bauman. Once again, she's portrayed a really excellent character. They wonder that Bernice Summerfield has literally lasted for 20 years because her way of actually portraying Bernice Summerfield is incredibly funny, witty, but also at the same time powerful. You respect her. She's a great character and something of which I find really enjoyable to in fact listen to, and to be honest it is a crime that she's not been in the TV show yet. She's just absolutely excellent. Reference to Valeyard in the first story at the very end of the episode is rather intriguing, and I love the way that she actually references how she knows the Doctor regardless of what body he is in, because naturally Bernice is in that rather unusual situation where, say, much like River Song, she's travelled with the different incarnations of the Doctor, and even to some extent she's found her own Doctor but from another universe. Yeah, I think in some ways she may have in fact met more Doctors than River Song, and arguably a little bit better than River Song as well, to be honest, if not a lot better. And story sees Bernice kind of go into a little bit more of a challenge between one of her companions, which is rather interesting, and you kind of have that more witty, jealous version of Bernice, which is rather interesting. And the final story, which I will go on to in a little bit, does do something a little bit different, where it in fact makes Bernice forget that she's Bernice almost, and she in fact plays another character instead, and the Doctor is in fact in the situation and kind of needs to help her along in this sort of weird planet scenario. Now, as I say, I will go into it in a little bit, but once again, Lisa Bauman did a great job actually portraying a less knowledgeable version of Bernice that is a lot more like the amateur archaeologist from many, many years ago. Moving on to a few other credits, Michael Jacent as the Valeyard in episode 1. Once again, as per usual, I can't fault Michael Jacent, honestly. He was excellent within the TV show, he was excellent within The Last Adventure, and within this box set he was excellent once again. In this episode he was posing as the Doctor, however at the same time he wasn't really making much of an effort to pose as a Doctor. He was still very much his evil self. He did shoot a few people. He's a little bit like the War Master, and I think that if Derek Jacobi was to meet Michael Jacent, that would be a really interesting sort of combination, because they do have a few similarities. But that said, at the same time, I think that this version of the Valeyard is a little bit flawed, because in this story we in fact get introduced to the idea that he is living this one incarnation and and that is pretty much it. He's not exactly as easy renewable as the Doctor. He can't just regenerate when he gets into trouble. Therefore, he is a lot weaker, and this story kind of sees him trying to confront that problem, to try and get the secrets of eternal life, because that obviously will be a lot more convenient for him, and will make him a little bit more of a useful Time Lord, much like how the Doctor actually is. Yeah, kind of using Bernice Summerfield as kind of a companion, but that said, at the same time, he's not really putting too much effort in. So yeah, Michael Jason is a very good character for this release, and I think that if you like the Valeyard, you will like this story, because it is a very Valeyard-centered episode. David Warner as the unbound version of the Doctor, as he's credited throughout this story as the Professor, which obviously if you listen to the episode you'll understand why. And yeah, he's David Warner. He's one of my favourite Doctors. I absolutely adore him once again. I think that this version of the Doctor is a little bit more like the older version of the Doctor that we've seen in Volume 3 of the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, where he is a little bit more reserved, and he's kind of more of that professor figure. He's at a desk kind of working, and he's in this sort of uni surroundings, I suppose, to great Doctor, and I love his relationship with Bernice naturally. It's one of which where he doesn't really sort of reveal that he really cares for her. He's not one of those Doctors that is very open with emotion, but it is quite obvious that at the same time the relationship that they have is very intriguing. I basically could listen to David Warner's Doctor for hours. More David Warner, because he's excellent and flawless, and I adore him, and I highly recommend checking out the other releases with him in, including Sympathy of the Devil, I think that it's called, and also the other Bernice adventures, because they are brilliant. And quickly going on to the other character for episode 2, which is the companion, who is played by Anisha Atwine, I think that's the way that they pronounce her name. And she plays Ruth, and she's the person on the cover who is obviously the Draven from the first Doctor story, Galaxy 4. And she's a companion that was in, once again, the more recent adventures of Bernice Summerfield, the box sets, who, once again, I've not actually experienced her character before. And in this story, she kind of has a little bit of a challenge with Bernice, because she ends up kind of being swept under the wing of this Draven civilization, and I think that she is a sort of lost queen or something like that, and it is rather interesting to see how that breaks up her relationship with Bernice. Yeah, a rather enjoyable character. However, I don't really have too much to say about her, because I don't really know much of her backstory. So yeah, that is really it for the other characters. I'm not really going to go into anybody else, because I don't think it's worth mentioning them at the minute. I'll probably get onto them throughout the review. Moving on to the narratives for this box set, much like with Story So Far Volume 1, you do have 3 adventures that aren't connected in any way. They just kind of share the fact that they have Bernice Summerfield in, and it is split throughout different eras of her life. This one is a little bit more, as I say, that newer version of Bernice. So episode 1 for this box set, or episode 4 of the entire Story So Far series, is Every Dark Thought by Eddie Robson. Episode 5 is Empress of the Draconians, written by David Llewellyn. And then the series finale, episode 6, is Angel of History, written by Una McCormack. And the whole box set is directed by Scott Handcock. The producer is James Goss, script editor James Goss, and also the executive producers, as per usual, are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haig-Ellery. Every Dark Thought is quite an interesting release to in fact start off this box set, because naturally it is quite a big deal to have the Valeyard returning. However, this story kind of underplays it. We don't really have much explanation of where he came from. We know that he's got a TARDIS somehow that is currently sporting a police public call box sort of exterior. However, it's a little bit of a knackered TARDIS that isn't really got much going for it, because he's trying to fix it and the cloister bell keeps on going off. However, his main idea for this story is to find the sort of eternal life that he wants to try and find in this rather sort of old archaeological dig that Bernice is currently digging as a part of this planetary sort of expedition that she is on. So once again, a little bit more of that intergalactic archaeologist's kind of character that Bernice is supporting this time around. Once again, a little bit more like the Unbound Adventures version of Bernice Summerfield, and perhaps even the New Adventures version. Once again, a little bit more of a recent sort of character trait that she's had. And yeah, I really do enjoy the story, partly because Bernice is this character that is believing the Doctor throughout the majority of the story, and then she goes off into this temple, what they believe is a temple at least, and then the walls change and everything around it changes. It's a little bit of a maze to some extent, and they find out that the whole of the entire maze is in fact this alien creature, And in this, they have these little things that are in fact the eternal life. That is, of course, the thing that the Valeyard wants. And the whole story is basically trying to get the Valeyard and then this character that is helping Professor Bernice Summerfield along with her dig at the same time through the maze alive and then get out the other side. But naturally, of course, the Valeyard has other ideas. There is a few casualties throughout this story. A nice cold-blooded, you know, something very much I'm used to the Valeyard doing, which is great. I think that Michael Jason does a great job, and at the very end of this story, we of course have him walking off into the distance, cackling away as per usual, which I'm interested to see what is next for the Valeyard. I don't particularly know what the current story is with the Valeyard, because I feel like the new series might want to cover it at some point, although we've been waiting for years, so I think that they've kind of had their opportunity to take up the plot line, yet haven't yet, unfortunately. But yeah, I kind of feel like his character is now an open bookend, and they could do quite a lot of few things with him. But I like the idea of basically Bernice making observations about the Doctor, and that is very much what this story is about, sort of Bernice confronting the Valeyard and saying, this is the Doctor that I know, this is what he does, he cares for people, he helps people, and this is who you are being, this darker version, and kind of the manifestation of his darker self. And it is interesting to have a bit more of a sit-down talk with the Valeyard, because I kind of feel like so far, especially in the last adventure, he has been a little bit more of a cackling villain kind of character, but in this box set I kind of feel like it tones it back a little bit and kind of confronts a few of his problems, sort of. It's a little bit like a counselling session, but for an evil villain. Meanwhile, whilst they're trying to get through this old ancient temple thing, there's also these villains coming after them called the Karagot, which is this rather unusual kind of, from what I understand, sort of Wirrin-esque creature that kind of eats people alive, and you can actually see the dead bodies inside them, which is rather grim and an interesting villain. It may have been nice to maybe see a little bit more of them, because I kind of feel like their whole aim in order to track down Bernice and the Valeyard was a little bit sort of underplayed, and it would be nice to maybe go into that a little bit more. Even sort of how they know the Valeyard, or the Doctor as they believe that he is. Yeah, it is rather nice just generally having that novelty of him stepping into the Doctor's shoes, considering that he is technically the Doctor, but also not at the same time. So yeah, overall, a really nice opening story, goes into some slightly different places, and also raises a few questions as well, which I think is possibly one of the more important aims of this story. Episode 2 of this box set is of course the Empress of the Dragons, written by David Llewellyn, and this episode is one that I like to refer to as the Doctor Who story of the two box sets, because it is certainly more Doctor Who themed than all of the other ones. It definitely uses a few Doctor Who characters such as the Dragons. So that said, it is nice at the same time to in fact have an alien from Doctor Who in the actual spin-off, but one of which isn't exactly one of the well-known ones. I think it's fair to say that the Dragons haven't really appeared much. Even in Big Finish, I don't really think they've brought them back that much at all. But this episode is mainly based on the planet Drava, and we have Ruth and Benny arriving or crash landing, and basically Ruth ends up being this lost princess, and there is this whole idea about the fact that they need to preserve her as a princess and basically use her almost as a little bit of a monarchy in order to be this icon to the rest of the Dravan society. And by the very end of the episode, there is this idea that they need to basically execute her and her new husband alive in order to kind of maintain this whole idea of like a golden image of like a, as I say, monarchy in real life. And it is very much using themes of the royal family today, but on another planet. I do like the idea of the Dravans, because they are sort of the more reserved version of the Dravans that we didn't necessarily know in Galaxy 4. This is kind of the previous civilization before they had any of their sort of technology in order to go out into space or anything like that. And it turns out that this episode raises the idea that Benny and Ruth have essentially started the revolution in order for them to then go out into the universe. Of course, them inevitably would end up having the events of Galaxy 4 and meeting the First Doctor. And there's this whole idea of kind of the effect, the domino effect coming after that, and what they have done essentially to this planet in order to then set the rest of the future, which is rather unusual. But that said, at the same time, I just like the idea of a story of Benny going to a planet essentially with one of her companions and then sort of having her own little adventure. It is almost like Benny is a version of the Doctor, a female version. I've always kind of seen her as a female version of the Doctor because everything about her, she's essentially a professor, she's a teacher, she looks after her companions at the same time. Pretty much she is a female version. I think that this story very much shows that at the same time, and generally I think that David Llewellyn does a very good job of almost creating this fairy tale story of what happens if we give you all of these amazing riches, what happens if we give you this big massive lovely temple where all of these sort of royal high up family of Drava live, And then what happens if we take your best friend from you? Things start getting a little bit worse, executing you in order to keep kind of this nice tradition going. So it is kind of giving the person, being Ruth, the nicest stuff, and then kind of very quickly it all going downhill. So yeah, it's rather interesting to see that, and I also like the way that this just strained the relationship between Benny and Ruth, because throughout this story I think it would be fair to say that Benny necessarily doesn't get jealous, she just gets cautious of what is going to happen to Ruth in the future, understandably, but at the same time Ruth kind of backfires with that and kind of thinks that she is just being jealous, but it turns out at the end of the day that Benny is being right in this scenario. And I think that my only problem with this story is a similar situation to the first box set, where I had the Braxiatel collection in Braxiatel in Love, or Braxiatel even, and I kind of felt like I was missing something in that story because I've not really been introduced to the location before. In this story, I kind of felt like I was missing something because I didn't really know Ruth as a character, I didn't really know her backstory or anything like that, so it may be nice to maybe bring a little bit of that into the episode, considering that I do believe that this box set is kind of meant to be a new beginner's box set, I suppose. It's something that I referred to the other box set being. So yeah, I think that it can still work as a new beginner's box set, but that said, at the same time, be warned, you might have a little bit of knowledge missing when it comes to Ruth as a companion slash character. Episode 6 of this box set and the final episode of the Story So Far series is Angel of History, written by Una McCormack. Now this episode sees Lisa Bowerman in fact taking on a slightly different version of Benny, where she doesn't in fact know that she is Bernice Summerfield, and instead she's playing this character called Annis, who is this person who lives on a planet where she's frowned upon because she's a certain member of society from sort of a certain sort of race of people, and she's an archaeologist. She does lectures in this university and she teaches the different students about history and previous lives and things like that in old pots, naturally what she used to do in quite a lot of old stories, so it's nice to have a little bit of foreshadowing in there. And naturally this episode kind of sees her character coming under a little bit of struggle, partly because she's excluded from different zones in this city that she is in, because once again she's this frowned upon sort of character in society because of her background and the race that she comes from, which is left a little bit unexplained. It's quite uncomfortable to watch, actually, seeing this person kind of with a few problems behind them and kind of being judged by the rest of society. And the main idea for this episode is basically Benny, or Annis, knowing that there is more to history than that is being taught on the lecture syllabus at this university, and she wants to go out on her own whim and basically teach the students the truth and what actually happened in history and what these sort of ancient pots that she is observing actually mean. And it turns out that this is kind of going against the rules of the society and the rest of the university, and as a result she does get fired. So it is kind of a little bit of a censorship story of what happens if you teach these people the truth, and she does get a few people almost flagging her before she gets fired because she is teaching the truth and she's worrying people. And yeah, it is a little bit like there's this high authority in society and kind of they are protecting the truth and hiding it. There's a character called Tamer who's played by Joe Shire, and he creates this item or this prop that basically you can attach to a sort of pot or something like that, an old piece of crockery that has been found in this archaeological dig, and then you can feel the emotions when it connects to your head of what that pot has experienced for its life, and basically it gives this old battered stuff that they've found deep under the earth a little bit of personality and kind of shows them the life that they have had, so say being in a temple, then going to a home, then being sold for a big amount of money, and then going into somewhere that's less sort of nice, and then going to a family. And it is very unusual to kind of give a pot, I think it was a vase in the case for this story, sort of personality and a life and kind of a character about it. But that said, at the same time, it was really interesting. I feel like Una could have maybe utilised that a bit more. I kind of felt like Bernice could have quite easily gone around this whole story and actually doing that, but instead she kind of took it under her own wing and got to the temple piece that she is currently sort of excavating, and instead she finds out the truth about that instead. And yeah, I kind of feel like maybe the personality stuff of the different things that she finds might have been a little bit underplayed, as I say. Could have been an opportunity there to do something different, but that said, at the same time, I did like the way that Una actually directed this story, showing the life problems of Annis as a character and kind of showing her being fired, and then by the very end of the story essentially showing her on the run from these different people because she is trying to uncover this truth in society. And it turns out that the people actually use her paperwork after being fired in order to kind of excavate the temple anyway, and then by the very end of the episode you have the Doctor that's kind of been helping her throughout the episode, thinking that he's a professor in the university who's kind of just looking out for her, but of course instead he is looking after Benny and kind of hoping that eventually she will get her memories back. And he constantly refers to her as Summerfield, which is a really nice little touch, even though that Annis is really confused as to why. And then by the very end of the episode you have this really touching scene where both Benny and the Doctor return back to this planet. It mentions how people turn against each other eventually, which is rather interesting, and to be honest I'm just looking forward to more Benny and Doctor adventures in the future, because I'm presuming that the next box set that will probably be coming out next year will be in fact the Unbound Doctor back once more. And for those of you that have listened to Volume 4 of the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield will know that that series in fact left on a rather interesting note. I'm interested to see where they in fact pick that up from, to see what they do next. Overall for Bernice Summerfield, the story so far, Volume 2, once again much like Volume 1, this is the perfect box set for the new listeners because it essentially gives you a whistle-stop tour of the different eras of Benny's life, especially when accompanied with the first box set. I think these will be perfect to buy together, simply because it gives you pretty much an anthology of adventures of the different series. It's a perfect way, and I think if anything, if a lot of sort of different series on Big Finish in fact did this, it would probably be quite a popular one. I think that especially stuff such as say Jago and Lightfoot, it has quite a big back catalogue behind it, and sometimes the very fact that there's a lot of it means people are generally put off that series, and that is something very much that put me off Benny, considering it has been going 20 years and I didn't really know where to start with it. So this is sort of the perfect place, along with the New Adventures as well, because that was pretty much a revival. But yeah, generally overall 3 really good stories, really enjoyed them. Loved the Valeyard as Michael Jason, I thought that he was excellent. Loved David Warner naturally, as well as the Unbound Doctor, and also the Dravin story, Empress of the Dravins, was a really cool character piece as well, and naturally Sir was flawless as Benny. As I said, just a few flaws here and there that I have covered already throughout this review, but generally I think that this might be, it's hard to say actually. I was going to say this is probably my favourite of the 2 box sets, but I really did like the Krell invasion in the first one, and also Benny meeting young Benny, so both of them kind of have different positives and negatives about each one, which generally just means buy them both really, because they are both really nice together. So we're all 2 really nice releases, and I can't wait to see what is next in store for the New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield. That's that for this review. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I shall see you all next time for more Doctor Who reviews, from product reviews, from episode reviews, from Doctor Who Series 11, and much, much more. Thanks for watching. I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.